What's going on, everybody? My name is EK Johnson. It's been a minute since I've gotten on here and talked about anything because life has been crazy. However, I wanted to get on here real quick and give my quick thoughts about the Houston Rockets being eliminated from the 2026 NBA playoffs last night in their abysmal 98 to 78 loss to the Los Angeles Lakers yesterday, ending our first round series 4 games to two. Before I get into that, just wanted to let you guys know that I will be posting more videos in the future, especially during the off season, covering everything from NBA news to WNBA news, as well as other basketball related content. So if you want to tap in with me, please follow my YouTube channel. Please follow me on Instagram. Please follow me on Twitter. The links will be in the description of the video. Thank you very much. Now, what to make of this abysmal Houston Rockets season that consequently ended very similarly to the way our season ended last year. As many remember, we ended up going down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors, who were 7 seed last year. We ended up coming all the way back, forcing a game seven, and getting blasted on our home floor last year, courtesy of Buddy Hield, who had 33 points in the game. In that game, offensively, we were abysmal and we couldn't shoot the basketball. The same could definitely apply to what happened last night. We ended up losing 98 to 78 last night. To put it in perspective, the Orlando Magic, who blew a 24-point lead to the Detroit Pistons, who ended their game only going 1 of 28, meaning they missed 28 of their last 27 shots. They scored more points than us. So that lets you know how abysmal our offense was. And obviously, no Fred VanVleet, who was, our point guard for the entire year. Steven Adams went down about 2 months into the season. He was probably maybe top three, top two in offensive rebounds and offensive rebound percentage. He contributed a lot to our offense in terms of second chances and things of that nature. When he went down, all of a sudden it just pretty much pulled the chinks. It pulled the covers over, our offense, and it allowed people to see how horrible we are offensively. And then Kevin Durant, who played 78 of 82 games, he was an absolute warrior. He had played the most games. That was, this regular season was the most games he had played since the 2018-2019 season. Consequently, we know how that ended in Toronto, with him tearing his Achilles. And I think him only being available for game two, which we lost by by single digits, it illuminated a lot of issues we have that a lot of Rockets fans have been saying for a very long time. Like, we don't have another outside creator outside of KD. We had opportunities to get an offensive creator, an individual who can create their own shot on the perimeter and things of that nature. But Raphael Stone sat on his hands during the trade deadline and did nothing. You know what I mean? And elected to sort of run with this team that has a lot of specialists, in theory. But, when you're in the playoffs and, the pace slows down and you have to be able to execute out of the half court, you can't just live off a heavy diet of heavy transition, forcing turnovers, getting second chances off of offensive rebounds. You have to have a competent offensive system, and we don't have a competent offensive system, and we do not have the personnel to execute said offensive system that we do have, because we do not have anybody who can consistently hit a mid-range jump shot, who can consistently attack a closeout, who can consistently put the ball on the floor. Consistently, meaning in games 4 and games 5, guys were hitting their corner threes, role players were hitting threes, everybody was hitting shots, and it looked great. But without our main offensive weapon there, which is Kevin Durant, on the nights where guys sort of revert back to the mean, meaning they typically do what they normally do, which is don't shoot the ball that well and don't create offense for themselves, you end up having a situation where you get exposed for who you are and for who you're not. Alperen Şengün is a player that I really, really like. I think his usage this year was extremely high for the role that he was asked to play and for his requisite skill set that he has currently. which allowed him to be exposed, and it also illuminated his inefficiency as a main offensive hub and as a scorer, right? Which then once again fell back on Kevin Durant, who averaged 26 points per game for this team, shot over 50% from the field, shot over 40% from three, shot over 85% from the free throw line, and once again was just an Iron Man for this team. And defensively, he was also very, very solid for us as well. And losing him, for 5 of these 6 games, it really once again illuminated how far back we are in terms of the personnel we have, and what we can do on the offensive end. You got to think about it from this perspective. In today's NBA, we held the Lakers to 98 points, and they shot 40% from the field. If we had a confident offense, we win that game easily. Any other team in the NBA, whether they made the playoffs or not, if they have a competent offense and they're able for a night or for a series to hold a team to around 100 points and around 40%, field goal shooting, that typically means that you're going to have a very good chance to win the game. But when you do not have not a single person who, once again, can consistently create offense for themselves and also cannot shoot either off the dribble or off the catch, it limits the amount that you can draw up as a coach, and it limits the amount of things your offense is able to do in the half court. And if you're not forcing turnovers, and if you're not creating second chance opportunities with offensive rebounds, then it really just looks ugly. You know what I mean? And that's what happened last night. That's what's been happening all year. That's what's going to continue to happen if we run this team back. I do believe in the offseason being a sort of a breeding ground for improvement. However, I think the improvements that are needed in order to run this team back would have to happen over multiple off seasons. And unfortunately, we don't have that type of time because Kevin Durant is 37 years old. A lot of talk has been sort of a lot of talk has been happening regarding his future with the team and whether or not we should try to get off of him and try to get a younger star like a Giannis or somebody like that. Or maybe if Alperen Şengün should be traded. In my opinion, based on the trends of this front office, how Rafael Stone and Ime Udoka seem to be sort of conjoined at the hip when it comes to the decisions they've made for this team, I believe that they won't run it back. I believe that unfortunately mostly everybody will be back. If they can bring Tari back, they're going to bring him back, right? If they can bring some of the other bench guys back, they're going to bring them back. If they can bring DFS back, whose contract just really, really hampered this team because he was brought in to essentially replace Dylan Brooks, and he resoundingly had the worst season of his life, and didn't do much better in the playoffs. Um, you know, like a Josh Okogie, who was supposed to come in and also provide, defensive intensity, and a guy who could give you spot minutes, give you, points off of broken plays, things of that nature. He was pretty much non-existent. You know, we talk about Tari Eason, who had an incredible start to the season shooting the ball, but then he goes out with a minor injury, comes back, and he's never able to really get that mojo back from the three-point line for a team that desperately needs shooting. We already don't have a point guard in Fred VanVleet. Steven Adams is gone, so our main offensive rebounding weapon and key to second chance points is also gone, right? Alperen Şengün not necessarily playing up to snuff because once again, his skill set does not demand the amount of usage he has. If he had lower usage, I think he'd be a better player. But unfortunately, we don't have anybody else who can create outside of themselves. Jabari Smith, I think he's a incredible, not incredible, but I think he's a very good rebounder. I think he's a solid defender. I think he's a good culture guy. But from a skill set perspective, it's year 4. He still can't put the ball on the floor consistently. And with his length, if he had that in his game, if he had the ability to even have an intermediate game to where, you can give him the ball, maybe in the mid post and allow him to maybe work in a one-on-one scenario, not just jab, jab, shoot, but also maybe jab, jab, one dribble, two dribble pull up, but at the end of the day, he doesn't even have that consistently. So those are things that are going to have to change over time. And I feel like this offseason won't necessarily fix that. I think if we want to see any improvement, we're going to have to move off of pretty much the entire bench and rebuild the bench because our bench this season and also in this playoffs were absolutely horrendous. There was a point in the third quarter, late in the third quarter, where we had one bench point. One bench point in a playoff game from a team who had won 52 games during the regular season. It's just unacceptable, right? It's just unacceptable. And I think those are the glaring issues that a lot of teams were able to, no, well, not a lot of teams, but the Lakers were able to really expose. Understanding that, when the starters go out, we don't necessarily have anybody to go to in our second unit who's reliable enough to, cause the Lakers to overcommit or to, like they can play straight up, right? They don't have to necessarily help off of one guy to double another guy. Sometimes you won't even have to worry about really guarding any of our second unit guys because none of them can shoot. I thought Reed Shepard, was absolutely horrendous last night. He just shot the ball horribly. I believe he was 4 of 16 from the field. Just a horrible performance for a very young player who, let's be honest, it's his second year, but this is really his first playoffs. So I'm not going to get on him too much. Obviously, Amen, he was very, very good throughout the course of the series, I believe. I just think last night, once again, it was just a matter of not being able to make shots. Guys couldn't make shots. Everybody shot horribly from the field. I believe we shot 31% from the field last night, and that's just not going to cut it. You know what I mean? When you have 37 points at the end of a half, that just shows you where you're going as a team, and that shows you that we need some offensive firepower. We need shooting, and I don't know if we're going to be able to address that in the offseason. I certainly hope so. But if we don't, we're going to be back here next year only with a healthy Fred Van Vliet and a healthy Steven Adams. And they'll probably push us to 55, 56 wins. And then we may end up running into the same issues next year with a KD that's a year older and no sort of immediate championship success in sight. So I think real change needs to happen in Houston this summer. To be completely honest, I am trepidatious and extremely apprehensive about the prospect of this front office doing so. But we'll see what happens. You know what I mean? And if they do so, I will gladly get up here and say I was wrong because I do want to be wrong about this. I hope they're just not sitting on their hands and saying, hey, we can rest on the fact that Kevin Durant wasn't there, that Fred Van Vliet wasn't there, that Steven Adams wasn't there. So because of that, we can go ahead and get those guys healthy. We have another year of Bari development, of Amen development, of Sengun development, maybe of Tari development, and of Reed development, and we can run it back with this young core combined with, these older veterans. In theory, that works. But for this team, I don't think it's going to be good enough. So that's all I got, man. I'll get into a more in-depth analysis of the entire season because it was definitely a season of ebbs and flows. But these are just my immediate thoughts after we lost last night. Good luck to the Lakers. Going down 0-3 in the playoffs, man, it's tough to come back from that. I'm proud that we were able to get 2 wins. I feel like I was definitely more impressed with the Game 5 win because it was in LA and it was a defensive game. And I think Barry really showed a lot of leadership in that game. We were able to take the Lakers out of their sets very, very early in that game as well and pretty much control the tempo and the pace of that game. I feel like Game 4 was more of a pride game, essentially. You see that from a lot of teams who go down 0-3. Typically, they're going to lose. Typically, they'll win the fourth game just off of pride alone. And typically, it'll be a one-sided sort of blowout and things of that nature, which was sort of on schedule for how we ended up winning in Game 4. We won 116-94. So yeah, I think overall, the season was not what we expected. I think once we saw what this team was, I think a lot of fans sort of shifted their expectations, accordingly. But still, when you have Kevin Durant, you're not bringing him in to lose in the first round. You're not bringing him in for him not to play. You're bringing him in so you can hopefully get a long playoff run out of him, which would maybe eventually, result in a championship berth or even a championship. And we are certainly far from that. So once again, let me know you guys' thoughts. I appreciate you for tuning in. You guys have a good one.